Hi guys, Dane here from CVF Racing. Today we're installing hood hinges on the 62 Impala. You can see we've already got the hinges installed, and so we wanted to take the time today to go over some frequently asked questions, some things to look out for, maybe a couple tips that'll help you with your installation. When we first installed these hinges, we made sure that the bolts and the slots were even on the driver's side and the passenger side. We used a little rule to do that. You check from the bolt head up to the top of the slot. So if this side was a 1/2 inch gap, we made sure the other side was a 1/2 inch gap. Same for front and rear. That way we know that the hinges are level up and down, and they'll both be tracking evenly as we're making our adjustments. The first thing we'll do now that they've been installed is we'll close the hood slowly. If you feel any binding, stop, go back up, make sure everything's tracking straight. The first adjustment we'll make once the hood's closed is we'll check our gap between our hood and our fender. Make sure that line's equal. We'll make that adjustment with the cam buttons right here. And then we'll also check that the hinges aren't towed in or towed out from each other. If they're towed in, they can bind as they're opening and closing. We want to make sure they stay parallel the whole time through that movement. So we'll go ahead and close the hood, check our gap, and we'll start making some adjustments. So we don't need to close the hood all the way for this, so we'll do that later, but we want to measure our gap on the front, in the rear, right at 1/4 inch on this side, and the same thing on the opposite side. So what we're doing is checking to make sure our gaps are equal and parallel. And so our driver's side is about an 1/8 inch gap, our passenger side is about 1/4. So what we're gonna do is move the whole hood over about a 1/16 to cut the difference there. And it looks parallel, so we won't have to do any side-to-side adjustments at this point. So go ahead and open the hood back up, make those adjustments now. All right, so now we'll go ahead and we'll loosen each cam bolt about a turn. And there's a little Allen key slot in there that we can use to turn the cam. So as we turn it, you'll see the hood start to move, and then we'll make some measurements and make sure that we're equal on both sides. All right, so I'll support the hood with one hand while I'm doing this. And we only gotta go out about a turn, nothing super tight. So we wanna make sure these cam buttons are both facing the same direction. So they should always be angling similarly, that way they stay square. Go ahead and make that small adjustment now. Now that we've made those adjustments, we also want to check that our tip of hinge on the fronts are also equal to the rears, so we're not towed in. So we'll go ahead and take a tape measure, go from front to front, and that's right at 50 inches. Come through. We'll go rear to rear. We're right at 50 inches on front and rear, which is good. So the hinges are tracking nice and parallel. If you were, let's say 50.5 in the rear, so the rears were out, we'd want to adjust the cam buttons so that way they're equal and tracking straight. If they're ever pointing in or pointing away from each other, you'll run into issues with bind. So let's make sure they're always tracking straight whenever we're making adjustments. Now this side has been adjusted. It doesn't mean that we just moved the hood that 1/16. The other side's loaded now, it probably has a little bit of tension against it. So we want to go to this side, make the equal opposite adjustment so it releases that tension, the hood will shift ever so slightly. So we'll make that adjustment now, and then we can close the hood and see where we're at. So we're still equal on both sides. We took any load or resistance that was pushing against each other out of the hood hinge. So now we'll go with the front, lower the hood down, we'll check our gaps. If we need to make any more adjustments, we'll assess then. So as I'm closing, I'm looking for my gaps, make sure we're not going to contact. And as we get down to where the hood latch is, I'm going to release it with my hand so we don't feel any extra resistance. If there's any bind or if the gas strut starts to bottom out, you want to be able to feel that and not feel it on the latch, or if there's a core support spring to help the hood pop. Sometimes it's a good idea to just remove it altogether so you don't forget about it. But so we'll release this here, we can close this, check our alignments. Everything's looking really good now. If you needed to make any corrections, open the hood, do the same thing we just did, make your minor adjustments. So next we'll move into getting the hood level. We can see that we're a little high in the rear, low in the front. We can use our slide rule to take some measurements, and pretty equal on both sides. As we should be, we made sure that both hinges were already level. So we'll go ahead and open the hood now, we'll make our next adjustment. All right, so we're only gonna make one adjustment at a time. So since the rear of the hood was high, we'll make that correction first. And to do that, we actually raise the front of the hinge up. Raising the front up helps bring the back down. It might be a little bit opposite of what you think, but if you bring the back of the hinge down to bring the back of the hood down, you'll find yourself working the whole hinge towards bottomed out and you never actually are correcting an issue. So again, to bring the back of the hood down, the front of the hinge comes up. We'll make that adjustment now. We'll loosen this front screw, pull up slightly, and then make the exact same adjustment on the other side. We'll take measurements to make sure they're both equal the whole time. We've adjusted both sides equally. We brought the front up on both sides, about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. Just take small adjustments when you're doing this. Big swings is gonna have you all over the place. A little bit makes a big difference. So we'll go ahead and close the hood now. This adjustment we made should make the hood go back towards the cowl, so we wanna make sure we don't contact it in any way. If we do, we'll make an adjustment to pull the hood forward with those same cam buttons we adjusted earlier. I can see we're getting really close to the cowl back here, so we'll go ahead and open the hood back up. We'll loosen our cam buttons on both sides and bring the hood forward about another 1/4 of an inch, and then we'll close it and we'll see where we're at there. Now that we have the hood moved forward a little bit, we'll go ahead and close it and see where we're at. So close slowly, watching our gaps. Looks like we got daylight. We got daylight. So our gaps are still looking good on both sides. Looks like now we're a little low in the rear corner, which is perfectly fine. But the passenger side corner is a little high. So to correct that, we'll do the same thing we did prior. We'll raise the front of the hinge up just ever so slightly on the front to bring that back down to where it matches that side. And then we'll make some turnbuckle adjustments after that to bring the hood level, and we'll be golden. Okay, now that we've made that little micro adjustment, we'll go ahead and lower the hood again and see if we match on both sides. And taking our time, checking gaps. Looks like we're low on that corner now too. Go to full close. Locked in place, good. So we're actually low on both corners now, just a little bit in the back. And that's perfect for what we're looking for right now. The front of the hood is even with the fenders. If anything, a tad low in the front, which is okay. All right, so we'll open the hood back up. Now we're at the point where we'll make turnbuckle adjustments. So extending the turnbuckles slightly will make a big difference. So do like a quarter turn at a time. Same adjustment to both sides. Very little bit's gonna bring the back of this hood up right where it needs to be. Now when we adjust this turnbuckle, make sure both jam nuts are loose. They are in this case. We'll use a 5/16 wrench for this collet. You should feel resistance when you're making this adjustment. So let's do a quarter turn. It's gonna take very little. If you are making that turn and it feels really easy, you probably went the wrong way. Shortening this turnbuckle is compressing the spring a little bit more. So we'll go ahead and do that same adjustment opposite side. Close our hood, see where we're at. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up the adjustments we're doing today on this car. There are still a few things that I wanna talk to you about. I mentioned I had some tips earlier, so I'll go into those now. I'm gonna grab a hinge. So when we're making our slot adjustments, either raising the hinge up in the back or down in the back in this slot, or the same thing for the front slot here, make sure when we're making that adjustment, we're actually pivoting on the other bolt. So the hinge is pivoting on that front slot, or it's pivoting on the rear slot. If you're not careful, what can happen sometimes when you're making an adjustment, let's say up in the rear, the whole hinge twists down as well. And you're gonna run into a problem where you're gonna see a way more adjustment than what you thought, or you try to make adjustment the other way and you're gonna think, well, I just moved this thing a bunch, it didn't go anywhere. Well, we're counteracting what we're trying to do when we do that. So keep an eye out for that. The next thing I wanna touch on again is this turnbuckle adjustment. This is gonna be for really minor adjustments. So if you're within an 1/8 or a 1/16 of the cowl and the fenders lining up on the hood, then it's okay to use this. For bigger adjustments, make sure you use your slots, get as close as you can there. The last tip I want to give you guys today is small adjustments make big differences, especially on these slots. You know, you saw earlier where a small 1/8 inch adjustment brought the back of the hood down more than a 1/2 inch. So if you take big swings one way or the other, you'll probably end up getting yourself into some trouble. If you have any other questions, and needing tech support, feel free to reach out to us via email or phone. Thanks for watching.